Gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my channel was about my journey to get really far away from the Western dating scene, Western women and Western relationships. Having been through what I describe as a soul-destroying experience in my life, I was dragged through the courts and I lost a ton of money. I decided that there has to be something better. So I decided to leave that country and travel to another part of the world to see if I could find a traditional relationship with a traditional woman. If this interests you, and this is something you're looking at doing, please follow my channel. So the topic of today's video is prenuptial agreements. Now, I think it's an important topic, and I want to talk about how... Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what everybody else does. I'm not going to talk about it. Okay, so there's so much information that's been put out at the moment by a lot of these agencies or by vloggers on YouTube. And we know so much about Ukrainian women. We know what they're looking for in a man. We know what they want out of a relationship. You know, there's information helping guys to be successful when courting a Ukrainian woman. We even know when we should have sex with a Ukrainian woman, as if it's like some kind of like magical beast that we need to somehow, you know, unlock. There's so much information, right? But the topic that always seems to get sidestepped, and I've seen a lot of videos, I follow a lot of these channels, and I've been doing that for probably a couple of years now, and I have never, ever once seen a video about prenuptial agreements. You know, they're happy to talk about everything else that portrays Ukrainian women like some sort of, you know, magical creature, and they're giving us advice about how to tame one of these magical creatures. But something that I think is important is talking about if one of those relationships doesn't work. And why is that? Well, what's the big deal? Why is it such a taboo to talk about? I mean, think about it this way. Like if you're going over to another country, chances are you probably are quite well established. You may have a house or several houses. You've probably got a car, a nice car. You've probably got money in the bank. You're established, right? And it makes sense to protect those assets or that money or whatever it is that you're trying to protect, or that you've worked hard for. It makes sense to protect that so that you can keep that for yourself, obviously, but also hand it down to your children. The last thing that any of us would want is to go through a situation where you lose what you've worked for. Now, I know that prenuptial agreements in Ukraine is something it's not unheard of, but it's not very common at all. And I'll give you an example of something that's come up a few times with me. Like I've spoken to Ukrainian women about what happened to me in my home country, and they find it hard to grasp this concept. And the way that I've explained it a couple of times to try and get them to understand how ridiculous and how absurd it is that if you were worth $5 million and you met a woman and she stayed with you for 3 years, or maybe less, depending on what the rules are in your country, that after those 3 years, she can just get up and go, or the relationship can fall over. You may want her to leave for whatever reason. And that $5 million gets split and she instantly becomes a millionaire. When I tell this story, the Ukrainian women are left scratching their heads because they don't have a system here that enables that to happen. It's just, and that's, you know, one of the theories is why Ukrainian women stick closer to their man, because they need him for support, right? But as we know, relationships don't always last. You know, they can go 5 years, 6 years, 10 years before they fall over. It might be one person's fault. It might be both of their fault. It might be no one's fault. But it makes sense to put something in place that's going to protect you, right? So that leads me back to, why does nobody talk about this? You know, there's a lot of information to get us to sign over some money and go on one of these tours or these romance companies or these agencies or something like that. But what about protecting the guys if it doesn't work out? This is the reason it's not spoken about, because it tends to lean towards the fact that Ukrainian women are just normal women, that if they were in an environment where they could take advantage of that law and that system, that they would, or that they could if they wanted to, I should say. So we have to understand that people are people, right? They will adapt to their environment. If a woman from any country goes into an environment where the relationship can turn and there is something there for her to get revenge or to try and ruin a guy's life, we have to assume that she would exercise that right. Because if we were to assume and go along the narrative that they're just so kind and innocent and sweet and they would never do anything like that, then we are stupid. And if you've never been through it before, you may be wondering, like, what am I talking about? This stuff never happens. But it happens, right? And they say that the woman that you marry is not the woman that you divorce. And I know this firsthand. Even though I've never been married, I understand how relationships can turn. See, when I started my channel, it was all about trying to protect the guys, you know, and trying to help make the guys make the right decisions so that nothing bad happens to them. As men, we need to protect what we've worked hard for. And the last thing that I would want to see is another man going through something that I went through. I made a video a little while ago, but it's only in Ukraine Fusion, and it sort of starts out the story of a friend who went through this whole thing, didn't have a prenuptial agreement, went to court, turned real messy, he got ordered to pay a whole bunch of money, he couldn't handle it, so he went and killed himself. And it's stuff like that that really makes me think that, you know, you really need to protect yourself if you are going to do something like this. So, let's talk about prenuptial agreements. I mean, I can't give you any advice because I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know enough about it. I do have an idea about what I'm going to do, and it's not about making sure that she gets nothing and she's left out on the street. It's about positioning yourself so if there is a judge looking at you, he can say, wow, that's kind of fair, like what you've sort of done there. So it's about being smart from the beginning. But who's going to teach us this? I mean, you can't tell me that out of these companies that have had like tens of marriages or hundreds of marriages even, that they haven't coached the guy through this question, that they've allowed those guys to get married without a prenuptial agreement. I mean, that to me just seems like not fair for the guys, right? So this is my request, or my shout out, I guess you could call it, to maybe some of these companies or these agencies that have dealt with a bunch of marriages or a bunch of relationships. What happened? Like, what stage did the guy talk to his Ukrainian wife to be? And how did it go down? Was it a success? Did they split up afterwards? Should it not be spoken about? Should it be spoken about at the start? There's got to be some advice out there. So please give some advice to protect some of the guys out there. So if they do go down that path of, you know, divorce later on, there's something in place that's going to protect them. Because one of the biggest fears that guys have when they go and do this is the whole she'll marry you, she'll get to your country, she'll divorce rape you, and you'll lose all your stuff, because that's what all Ukrainian women are like, which is obviously is not true, I can tell you that right now, but it is a fear, so maybe we can dispel that fear somehow. So that's my video, not about prenuptial agreements. My name is Striker. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys next time.